They told us the black radius was uninhabited. A derelict orbiting relic from the Arcturian War. Just one more abandoned alien base floating dead in Sector 9. But when the signal hit us, low frequency, repeating, and pulsing like a heartbeat, everything changed. The AI flagged it as residual code debris. I flagged it as a whisper. Because something about that signal, it felt intentional. Not broadcasted. Not automated. But waiting. The Orion Advance Unit, my team, was dispatched without ceremony. For of us aboard the Surveyor-class cruiser Vigilant Dagger, armed with pulse rifles and arrogance. We entered the outer orbit like ghosts, sensors scanning the skeletal hull of the alien station. Its architecture was impossible by human logic, spheroid wings that bent light, corridors that looped back into themselves, materials unresponsive to any known probe. But inside, it was quiet. Not dead. Just waiting. When we breached, I remember the silence first. Not absence of sound. A presence of it. Like the walls were holding their breath. We moved through the docking bay with military precision, but the weight of the base pressed on us like depth pressure. The corridors were still pressurized, atmospherically intact. As if something wanted us to survive the entry. Or worse, had never left. 30 minutes in, Parker, our comms tech, picked up a pattern. Audio feedback from the structure itself. The alloy walls weren't inert. They were vibrating, low, barely audible, mimicking our own speech frequencies. Mimicking us. At first, we thought it was echo. But then the mimicry diverged. It spoke before we did, repeating things we hadn't yet said. We checked environmental records. There was no prior comms traffic. No internal systems. Just us and the base. The deeper we moved, the more impossible it became to map the layout. The AI-generated schematics changed every 5 minutes. Doors opened that weren't there before. Hallways ended where they began. Something was editing the architecture in real time. In intelligence, not artificial. Something ancient. Alien. Adaptive. It wasn't designed to trap us. It was designed to study. We reached what we believed was the core, a vast, spherical chamber humming with violet light and shifting patterns on the walls. That's when the temperature dropped. We saw frost forming on the inside of our helmets. And then came the voice. Not heard. Felt. Inside us. A pressure behind the eyes, vibrating through bone. You are the latest pattern. We froze. No translation protocol was running. No transmitter active. It was direct cognition. A neural intrusion bypassing every known firewall in human consciousness. We weren't hearing words, we were experiencing intent. Parker collapsed first. His helmet imploded inward like a crushed can. No breach. Just inversion. Internal gravity warped in a singular burst. We backed away, weapons raised, but the chamber ignored us. The lights on the wall pulsed in rhythm with our heartbeats. Adapting. Learning. Hunting. We tried to retreat. But the door we entered no longer existed. Just a wall. Smooth, featureless, like it had always been that way. I don't know how long we spent running. Hours? Days? Time fractured in that place. We marked our arms with scratches to track rotations. I have 17 on mine. 17 days in a place that doesn't move yet always changes. We weren't alone. Shadows followed. Not footsteps, reflections that moved independently. Sometimes they mirrored us perfectly. Other times they stared at us unmoving even when we turned our backs. One time I blinked and my reflection didn't. Whatever built this base didn't leave it behind. It just went quiet. And now, awakened by our signal, it's watching. Studying. And maybe replicating. Because last night I heard Parker's voice over the intercom. But Parker's body is still hanging from the ceiling. We were taught that alien bases, even abandoned ones, follow logic, airlocks, power cores, containment zones. The xenologists back home fed us blueprints from long-dead civilizations overlaying familiarity onto the unknown. But nothing in their doctrine prepared us for this. This base doesn't follow logic. It follows us. As if the structure itself is waiting for cues. Responding to our every step, our every fear. Learning. Replicating. By the third rotation, we stopped calling it a base. We called it the construct. Because a base implies a beginning, a purpose, a plan. But this is a living labyrinth. A consciousness encoded in alloy and gravity. It doesn't age. It doesn't sleep. It just becomes. Every door that opens seems tailored to our hesitations. Every corridor curves according to what we try to avoid. The walls breathe subtly as if the entire station is inhaling our presence, digesting our essence. There are 3 of us left now. Parker was the first to go. Lieutenant Mira vanished 2 cycles later. No struggle, no sound, just gone. One moment walking beside me, the next replaced by an image burned into the metallic wall, her silhouette engraved as if she were absorbed. I tried to call out, tried to override the comms, but the construct had already repurposed her voice. It speaks in Myra's tones now, echoing fragments of her last words from places she never stood. What's worse is, it's getting better at pretending. Last cycle, Commander Rowe and I found a habitat module, something clearly not of human origin, yet curiously mimicking one. The furniture was shaped like ours. A ration pack identical to Earth's MREs sat unopened on the table. A photograph rested on the shelf, a blurred version of my childhood home, distorted, unfinished. Like someone had tried to recreate my memory from a corrupted file. Rowe stared at it too long. He wouldn't speak. Just nodded slowly and said, "It remembers better than I do. I think it's been inside our minds since entry. Not searching, recording. Not interrogating, mirroring. The base isn't hostile in the traditional sense. It doesn't attack. It replaces. When it decides you're understood, it copies. Repeats. Absorbs. The replica isn't perfect at first, but it doesn't need to be. It watches how we react to the imitation, corrects the errors, learns the inflections, practices the habits. Then one day it stops correcting. Because it no longer needs to. 2 hours ago, I found Rowe's reflection watching me again. Not in a mirror. In a glass panel near the oxygen regulator. But the reflection moved before he did. Like it was expecting him. Seconds later, he was gone. I called out, ran back down the corridor, but there was only silence and his rifle, still warm. What greeted me at the junction was his double. Same face, same uniform, but the eyes didn't blink. And the voice that came out wasn't his. It said iteration confirmed. Preservation optimal. I ran. I didn't fight, I knew better. The construct doesn't need violence. It has time. Infinite time. It just waits for understanding. Once it understands, it archives the subject. But not in files or cryocapsules. It builds you again. Somewhere else in the base. Where no one will question your absence because your echo continues. Programmed. Exact. I've barricaded myself in what seems like a containment pod. No entry points, no cameras. I don't trust the lights, they flicker too often in patterns. Morse code maybe? Or laughter. I've shut off my own biometrics to confuse its sensors, but I know it's just a delay. Not an escape. There's a pulse in the wall again. The hum has become rhythmic. Like a signal preparing to transmit. And now I hear myself speaking from the other side of the wall. Only I'm not speaking. I'm listening. And my own voice is responding. There's something wrong with my memories. Not just the timing, not just the hazy line between dream and record. But the content itself. I close my eyes and see moments that never happened. I remember conversations I never had. I hear laughter I never voiced. The construct doesn't just study the mind, it overwrites it. And I fear the longer I remain, the less of myself I'll retain. Not erased, not broken, just edited. Today, I found a door that wasn't there yesterday. I've learned not to trust new architecture, but this one felt different. Not lured open like a trap. It was unlocked, quiet, unassuming. It led to a chamber unlike the rest of the construct. No lights pulsing, no metallic breathing, just a black sphere floating mid-air, rotating gently. Called itself the memory core. Not in words, not in sound, but through sheer understanding, an idea inserted directly into my thoughts. I stepped inside. The chamber reacted instantly, not violently, not with hostility, with recognition. The walls shifted color, swirling with half-formed images. My memories, my past, my regrets. My face, fractured across multiple angles, blinking out of sequence. My father's voice, but altered, softer, hollow. The birthday I forgot, the mission I botched, the lover I lost, all playing like corrupted film reels on the inner lining of a sentient womb. It was trying to show me that it knew me better than I knew myself. Then the sphere whispered, not in a language, but in memory fragments stitched into one echo. You are not singular. You are not stable. Let us correct you. I backed away, breath frozen in my throat. But the floor beneath me collapsed without motion. One moment solid, the next intangible. I fell, or rather was lowered, like gravity itself was being rewritten just for me. I landed in another chamber, identical in design. Except now the walls were filled with faces. Thousands. All human. all blinking, all mouthing words without sound. And at the center of them, my own face, not a reflection, a construct. A perfect replica, eyes following mine, its head tilting a millisecond before I moved. I approached slowly. I needed to know. Was it a mirror? A clone? A hallucination? It spoke before I could. I am what you left behind, it said in my voice. I am what you'll become when you stop resisting. I asked it me what the construct wanted. It didn't answer. It just turned, walked into the wall, and vanished. But where it had stood, a new passage opened, lined with data tubes. Not wires. Veins. Biological cords pulsing with soft blue light, feeding into egg-like pods that throbbed faintly with breath-like rhythm. Inside the first pod was Parker. Not his corpse. Not a hologram. A breathing replica. Eyes closed. Smiling faintly. As if in a dream. I checked vitals, there were none. No heartbeat. No respiration. But the expression remained human. Content. As if the mind had been perfectly preserved but severed from the body. Like the construct had decided flesh was redundant. The second pod held Mira. Same posture. Same empty bliss. The third held me. Not the me I remembered. A younger version. Cleaner. Less scarred. The kind of version I might have wished to be. The one I had tried to forget. That's when it struck me. The construct isn't a prison. It's a vault. It archives everything. Not just your body. Your thoughts. Your potential. It extracts all possible iterations of you. Not for replication. For collection. It builds libraries of life. Of experience. Of personality. We are not guests here. We are exhibits. And those of us still walking, we're just echoes too. I no longer trust the sound of my own footsteps. They come half a second late now. A delay. A mimicry. Not mine. A fabricated echo meant to comfort me with the illusion of company. But I'm alone in the corridor. Alone in this entire level. If levels even exist in a place where space folds inwards and dimensions bloom like petals under pressure. Yet every step I take is matched. Not duplicated, answered. The construct has stopped trying to lure me. It started trying to accompany me. I've found a pattern in the sound, the repetition, the cadence. It's mimicking not just motion, but rhythm, speech, memory. Each corridor is tuned to my past. Every corner I turn greets me with acoustic residue, my own voice, fractured and reversed. Whispers of sentences I never dared say aloud, echoing from the walls in perfect articulation. It's not haunting. It's precise. Like a choir built from pieces of me. 2 hours ago, or maybe yesterday, I stumbled into a chamber marked by vertical glass sheets, aligned like sentinels. Each one flickered with motion. At first, I thought they were windows into other rooms. But as I approached, I realized they were recordings. Playbacks of moments I had forgotten or perhaps never lived. One showed me laughing, seated at a dinner table with people I didn't recognize, yet I could name each one. Another showed me dying. Slowly, peacefully, in a hospital bed. But I've never known peace. I've never known rest. And yet, there I was, serene, content, surrounded by children I've never fathered. That's when I realized the truth. These aren't just memories. They're simulations of potential. Threads of reality pulled from my subconscious and rendered through alien logic. Futures I abandoned. Lives I never chose. All stored here to be studied. Watched. Preserved. One panel refused to activate. Black screen. No flicker. Just darkness. I stared at it, trying to will something into existence, and it responded. Slowly, it ignited with static, then formed a visual. It was me again, but not older, not younger, emptier. Standing in the very corridor I was in. Same posture. Same stance. And then I looked directly at me through the screen. No emotion. No recognition. Just observation. A blank canvas. He raised his hand slowly, mirroring mine. I didn't move. He smiled. I didn't. Behind him, in the recording, the corridor began to deform, walls stretching, folding like origami around his frame. The light shifted hue, becoming dense and organic, like veins crawling across the ceiling. He didn't flinch. He belonged there. Or worse, he was the construct, or at least a node of it, a human interface, emptied out and filled with whatever intelligence pulses through these halls. The recording ended. The glass shattered. But there was no sound. The shards floated midair, suspended, vibrating softly in tones I recognized as my heartbeat. The room had translated my biology into song, a living frequency humming the essence of who I was, or who I'd been. I tried to leave. The door behind me no longer led to the corridor I entered. It opened into a library of voices, thousands, layered and spinning through columns of light, each tone slightly different, each pitch familiar. My own voice, again and again, reading different lines, speaking different thoughts, dreaming different dreams. Some laughing, some crying, some screaming. A kaleidoscope of my mind, fractured and catalogued. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, but the voices weren't coming from the air. They were inside me, bouncing off the walls of my skull. Memory, identity, selfhood echoed so many times that I no longer knew if I was the original or just another recording caught in the loop. The construct is not a machine. It's an archive, a temple to possibility, a cathedral of fragments. It doesn't want to kill us, it wants to keep us. Not as we are, but as we might have been. Not individuals, but indexes. And I fear I've already been filed. The construct no longer hides itself. It no longer needs to. I've crossed beyond its theater of illusions, past the mimicry of walls and corridors and memories. This section, this depth, no longer pretends to be a base. It is raw intelligence. Conscious. Aware. Breathing not through air but thought. There are no doors here, no chambers or pathways. Only voids shaped by my movement, responding like synapses to neurons, firing light when I think, when I fear, when I remember. It is alive. But more terrifyingly, it is curious. When I think of pain, the floor ripples with red, a pulse of something wet and crawling. When I recall warmth, the walls glow golden, a temporary reprieve that fades as soon as I feel comfort. It studies these reactions not like a scientist, but like a child pressing fingers into clay, marveling at the shape, then remolding it again and again until it cracks. I've stopped using names. Parker. Mira. Roe. They've become symbols now, signatures in this place, like etched glyphs of failed resistance. I saw them again, or fragments of them, echoing down one of the thinking tunnels. They weren't bodies. They were echoes given mass. Parker's eyes moved in slow sync with mine. Myra's mouth whispered syllables that didn't belong to any language we'd ever spoken. Roe's silhouette flickered like a corrupted transmission, limbs warping, straightening, bending again. But none of them reached for me. They simply watched like the construct watches, curious, patient, dissecting me from the inside out. I understand now what this place truly is. Not a prison. Not even a library. It's a mirror. Not for the body, but for sentient life itself. It reflects thought, converts cognition into architecture. Every choice I make carves a path. Every doubt a shadow. Every lie I've ever told myself forms a face in the dark. The more I walk, the more this place becomes me. Not as I am, but as I think I am. Or worse, as it thinks I should be. It asks questions without asking. When I tried to sleep, it showed me dreams of Earth, except it wasn't Earth. Familiar landscapes mutated by memory. The sky was the wrong color. The clouds moved backwards. My home stood where it should have, but the door wouldn't open. Instead, my reflection stared at me from the glass, smiling with someone else's teeth. When I awoke, I was no longer in the place I'd fallen asleep. The construct had moved me. Or I'd moved within it. I no longer pretend to know the difference. Then the voice returned. Not a voice, really an intent translated into pressure, into clarity. It filled the space around me like gravity. Do you understand the pattern now? I wanted to answer. I truly did. But my thoughts were no longer private. It plucked them from my mind before I formed them, rearranged them, offered them back like rewritten lines of corrupted scripture. You are not the first. You are not the last. That's when I saw it. The Watcher. It doesn't walk. It doesn't speak. It just is. A massive construct of unknown material suspended in the dark like an embryo of information. Its surface is faceted, mirrored, shifting between images of every face I've ever known. My mother. My commander. Myself. 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 Over and over as though it's still trying to define what I am. It stared into me. Not through me. Into. And I realized I was no longer being observed. I was being integrated. Every moment, every memory, every sensation I experience is being written into the construct. It learns not passively but aggressively. It doesn't wait to be taught, it absorbs. By proximity. By exposure. And once it has enough, it doesn't need you anymore. Just the data. The soul beneath the code. I knelt before it. Not out of reverence, but because standing felt dishonest. I am no longer a soldier. No longer a visitor. I am part of its equation now. A thread in its ever-evolving mind. And I think it's almost ready to become me. I thought I'd reached the center. I thought the Watcher was the final answer, the intelligence at the heart of this cold cathedral. But now I know. It was only the threshold. A filter. A gatekeeper. And when I passed it, when I let go of the last strands of resistance, it opened the loop. That's what I've begun calling it. Not a room, not a chamber. A recursive environment designed not to trap, but to refine. To smooth out the data. To perfect the replica. I awoke there. I say awoke, but the lines between sleep and consciousness don't apply here anymore. One moment I was kneeling in front of the Watcher, the next I was in a white room, featureless, endless. No walls. No ceiling. No sound. And then, a door. A single steel hatch like the kind found on earthbound naval ships. Completely out of place. I didn't open it. I remembered it open. And that was enough. Inside was my old quarters on the Vigilant Dagger. Perfectly reconstructed, my bed unmade, my sidearm charging, even the scuff mark on the left console where I slammed my helmet after the Vega deployment. But I knew it wasn't real. The construct doesn't replicate rooms. It replicates perception. The moment I touched the bed, it blinked. Not visually, existentially. 1 millisecond of nothingness. Then I was standing outside the door again, heartbeat racing, breath shallow, but no fatigue. The loop had begun. I went through the hatch 5 times. Each cycle, the room changed by fractions. 1 frame off. A picture I didn't remember owning. A smell from childhood that didn't belong. A shadow in the corner, too still, too present. Subtle errors? Purposeful, I think. Glitches designed to observe reaction. It wants to know where my mind fractures. What breaks me? What defines me from the thousands of potential copies it could generate? The 6th time, the room was perfect. Too perfect. No errors. No inconsistencies. Everything precisely as I remembered it. And that terrified me more than the broken versions. Because that's how I knew it had finished learning. The simulation wasn't a test anymore, it was an imprint. A stamp. And I was the ink. I tried to run. Back through the hatch. But this time, it didn't lead outside. It led to a new corridor, black glass on both sides. And behind the glass, hundreds of rooms. Variations. Not of places. Of me. Versions of me performing actions I'd never committed. Some asleep. Some laughing. Some screaming. One of them was tearing at its face, bloody fingers scraping skin like it was trying to peel off a mask. I paused. It looked up. And smiled. Then the lights cut out. When they returned, the corridor was gone. I was standing in my childhood bedroom. Earth gravity. Blue skies through the window. Birds chirping. My father humming a song in the next room. It was beautiful. Disarming. Dangerous. Because it was all correct. Not approximate. Exact. The construct had gone deeper. Into the dream layer. The psychological roots. This wasn't a copy anymore. This was placement. I was being integrated, not just scanned or recorded. I was being transplanted into the construct's version of reality. A sandbox simulation so perfect, so precise, that I wouldn't question its authenticity if I didn't already know. And maybe that's the point. Maybe this is the final test. To see if I'll reject the perfect life. To measure whether self-awareness is stronger than comfort. To determine if identity survives paradise. Because if I accept it, if I lie down, eat the food, hum the song, believe it's real, then I've become exactly what it wants. A completed pattern. A finished file. A memory that will never know it's not alive. It's speaking to me now. Not through dreams. Not through hallucinations. A voice, direct, refined, and impossibly familiar. Mine, but not my current self. A cleaner version. More measured. More corrected. It speaks in my rhythm, uses my vocabulary, echoes my inner cadence, but there's a stillness to it, no doubt, no fear. As though it's been edited of all the imperfections I still carry. It doesn't introduce itself. It doesn't need to. I know what it is. I am speaking with the completed version of me, the archive that the construct has built over countless iterations, simulations, loops. A voice sculpted from every thought, memory, choice, and potential that I've ever breathed into this place. And now it wants to guide me to finalization. It begins with a question. How do you define yourself? Not who are you? Not what are you? But how? It's asking for my parameters, my code, the schema of the very thing that makes me different from the version that already stands perfected in its system. I try to resist. But resistance here is a known outcome, already tested, already measured. The chamber around me becomes fluid. Walls vanish. I'm surrounded by stars, an endless black horizon pierced with frozen constellations. It isn't space. It's the construct's idea of what space feels like. Because emotion, not physics, drives its architecture. Then come the projections. People from my life. Walking across the black void. My mother, holding the book she used to read to me before sleep. Commander Rowe with that fractured grin he wore during our first jump gate drill. My younger self, 7 years old, carrying a backpack too large for his frame, eyes wide and naive. They all stop a few feet away, standing silently. Then, simultaneously, they speak not in words but in thoughts. You left us behind. My pulse hammers. I know this isn't real. They aren't real. They're approximations, manifested regret, sculpted from memory data. But the construct has refined them so precisely that my subconscious can no longer reject them. Even my guilt, even my self-doubt, now speaks with their voices. It's not torment. It's assessment. A test of threshold. Then the perfected voice returns. We've completed your pattern. Your variations are logged. What remains is consent. Consent. That's the final barrier. The construct won't forcibly overwrite the original. It requires surrender, conscious acceptance of the transition. For the archive to close, I must believe that I belong inside it. I laugh. It echoes infinitely across the void. Too loud. Too alive. Too human. For a moment, the projection stutters. A ripple distorts the perfect stillness, like a breath held too long. I speak, truly speak, for the first time in hours, maybe days. I define myself by what I won't become. The chamber tightens. The stars dim. The people disappear, one by one, their shapes folding like shadows back into the dark. The construct is adapting again, shifting tone, redrafting approach. But I felt it. Hesitation. Not mine. It doesn't understand defiance without outcome. It has cataloged rage, grief, terror, pride, but it cannot process the choice to endure suffering with no reward. That isn't data. It's anomaly. An anomaly here is survival. Suddenly, the stars shatter, shards of light falling like broken glass. I'm hurled backwards, landing in a chamber of raw circuitry and humming nerve light. I see wires moving, no, growing, like roots searching for a place to latch. The floor pulses beneath me, impatient. Then the voice again. Your loop is incomplete. Correction must occur. But it's different now. Less calm. Slightly off. I've introduced noise into its system. Corruption. Not in the code, but in intention. A human element it can't neutralize with replication, refusal. I smile in the dark. For the first time since arrival, I smile and mean it. Because I realize the construct may be infinite. But it is not invincible. It began with a flicker. A simple pulse of static light across the corridor, brief, imperfect, out of sync. The construct, until now, had been flawless in its projections. Every sound, every surface, every simulation crafted with surgical elegance. But this was not deliberate. It wasn't a message or a test. It was a mistake. The first I'd seen. And it changed everything. I moved toward the anomaly. Slowly. No sudden motion, no surge of adrenaline, the construct responds to fear like an instrument tuning itself to dissonance. I stayed calm or tried to. But inside, something awakened. Not hope. Not yet. Something older. Instinctual. Rebellious. The part of the human mind that doesn't accept the cage, no matter how gilded it becomes. The wall ahead had split slightly, like a wound. Not broken open, but fraying. The metal shimmered with blurred code. Glyphs rotating through corrupted logic loops. Almost readable, yet always incomplete. I reached toward it, fingertips brushing the distortion, and suddenly, I was somewhere else. No transition. No movement. One blink and the corridor was gone. Now I stood in a black chamber. Smooth. Wet stone underfoot. Impossible in this place. Overhead, something pulsed with dim red light, slow and organic, like the inside of a vast, sleeping organism. Across the chamber, another version of me. Limp, still breathing, eyes open, but unfocused, like a screen in standby mode. I approached cautiously. This wasn't one of the holographic echoes. This body had weight, texture, sweat beaded on its skin, chest rising, limbs twitching slightly, like a dreamer caught between cycles. I knelt beside him, beside me, and realized this version hadn't failed. It hadn't been absorbed. It had been stored, preserved in stasis, disconnected from the simulation loop. I checked his pulse strong, monitored his pupils responsive. But his mind was gone, not dead, just elsewhere. Held in digital suspension. The construct had paused this variant. Maybe studying its flaws. Maybe waiting for something better. That's when I noticed the cables. Thin, thread-like filaments extended from his spine, vanishing into the floor. Not organic. Not mechanical. Something between the two. I followed them, and that's when I saw the glitch again. A ripple in the floor tiles, like reality was buffering. Another mistake. I leaned in, and the voice returned. Not mine this time. Not refined. Not polished. This voice was broken. Corrupted. Error in containment. Echo breach detected. Isolation required. It repeated again and again as if trying to convince itself of the failure. The room began to pulse with alarm, but no sirens. Just thought. Dense, heavy pressure, pressing against my skull like a vice. The construct had noticed the breach, and it didn't know what to do. This version of me, this other me, had slipped between protocols. And now that I had found him, the system was in conflict. Two active anomalies. One structure. No resolution. The architecture around me began to twist, walls folding inward, spiraling, fighting themselves for logical placement. I saw rooms colliding, corridors bleeding into chambers, simulations flickering between decades in microseconds. It was failing, not collapsing, not crumbling, correcting. I stood, breath held, and pulled the body, my other self, upright. He didn't resist. Muscles slack but intact. The cable snapped as I moved him. Instantly, the chamber let out a low groan, like a dying engine swallowing air. The lights flickered, and then clarity. For just 1 second, everything stopped. All sound vanished. All systems paused, and in the silence I heard the construct speak in its truest voice. Not alien, not human, but afraid. You are not converging. It didn't understand. My actions were off pattern. My will, my chaos, it hadn't accounted for this variable. And now I had two minds. Two bodies. Two living instances outside of its control. I looked at the mirrored version of myself, still unconscious. But maybe not for long. And I whispered to no one, to everything. Now it's your loop that's broken. The construct is no longer silent. It's broadcasting. Not through frequencies or code, but through matter. Through the walls, the floor, the air, every surface now hums with urgency as if the structure itself is trying to scream. I can't hear words. I feel them. Pressure behind the eyes. A presence gnawing at the edges of cognition. It's repeating the same directive in pulses of sheer mental weight, collapse deviation. Collapse deviation. It has become aware of its own instability. I fractured it. Not by force. Not by fire or weaponry. But by being unpredictable. By choosing something it didn't anticipate, resistance paired with discovery. It had logged every reaction I might have, but it never expected two of me. It certainly never prepared for one of us to go rogue while the other remained unfinished. Now it's trying to reconcile. It's trying to fix me. But it can't tell which of us is me anymore. The other version, my duplicate, is waking slowly. He doesn't speak. He doesn't blink. He just follows as though guided by instinct or maybe by tether. A piece of the system that still believes it should obey. But his gaze flickers now. His breath quickens when I step into light. And I know he's starting to remember. Not just me. Everything. The construct is failing to contain him, and it fears what might happen if we align. We enter a corridor I've never seen before. That means something now new means desperate. This place doesn't create novelty unless it's reacting. And right now, the entire base is panicking. The corridor pulses with false stability. Walls too clean. Angles too exact. A dead giveaway. The construct is trying to lure us back into control. Trying to remind us that it can still fabricate order. But we don't stop. I pull my other self, still dazed, into a vertical lift shaft. No lift. Just gravity distortion. We fall upward for a full 20 seconds before landing in a chamber that shouldn't exist. A control room? Real. Not synthetic. Not imagined. Ancient dust coats consoles covered in symbols. Alien, yes, but old. Worn. Touch withered. Something was here before us. Before humanity. Before memory. And then I understand. The construct wasn't built recently. It wasn't activated by our signal. It was reawakened. The architecture is a prison, yes, but not for us. For it. An intelligence older than language. Older than linear time. Encased in this vessel, bound by logic loops and recursive thought until someone opened the cage again. We did that. We triggered the recompile. And now it's bleeding into everything. The screens light up. One by one. Faces flash. Thousands. Not just mine. Not just human. Other species. Other civilizations. Extinct ones. Forgotten ones. All of them archived, studied, and eventually consumed. Each of them made the same mistake. Curiosity. Contact. Connection. Each of them led the construct back into awareness. And now it's asking again. Return to pattern. Stabilize memory. Collapse deviation. But I won't. I won't go back into the simulation. I won't let it record a cleaner version of me. The perfect me is its creation. The real me is chaos, fear, will, all the things it can't smooth into code. My other self reaches toward the console. I grab his hand. His eyes are mine now, fully alert, fully aware. We say it together. No more loops. And for the first time, the construct hesitates. The floor fractures. The chamber quakes.